I was like, I'm either going to change or I'm going to take a hot shot and kill myself. Right. That's at the point of depression that I was. I had like this huge hole in my chest where everything that I was doing was no longer working.
To have once been a criminal is no disgrace. To remain a criminal is the disgrace. I formerly was a criminal. I formerly was in prison. I'm not ashamed of that.
Hey, you guys, I want to thank you for joining us today on I Used to Be a Criminal. Today we got a real good guest for you. I got my guy, Jason Toro, on the show today. You guys are going to really enjoy him.
Mr. Marlo.
Hey, what's up, Jay? Thank you for coming to the show. Speaking to my audience, I really appreciate your time, my brother.
Right on. All good. I'm happy to be here, Mr. Marlo.
Most definitely. We're a firm believer in can't nobody introduce a person like the person themselves, right? Everybody know themselves. You got to know yourself. So I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Jason Toro. First and foremost, I'm a husband. I'm a parent. I'm a grandparent. Believe it or not, a homeowner here in San Leandro. I'm director of diversion and reentry with La Familia Counseling Service. I've been doing this work around, criminal justice reform and, public health and, workforce development for 20 plus years. And I love life. I'm able to look into the mirror and, and be like, this is a good person. But the fact is that before all of this, I used to be a criminal.
Wow. He has sent me to comfort the crushed and to proclaim that prisoners will be released and freed. Let's go, Jay. Will you explain to my audience a little bit about your upbringing, where you grew up at, and how was your household?
Absolutely. My folks, we grew up seriously poor, right? There were many times we didn't have lights on, we didn't have water, we didn't have, basic necessities and things like that. We traveled around a lot. I think my parents were always trying to, do these geographical relocations to try to find, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and it just never really materialized. I was born on the East Coast in Jersey, born in Jersey City. Grew up in New Jersey till I was around 9. Actually, caught my first little case out there when I was 9. Me and this kid up the street did a bunch of damage, at the high school where they parked the buses at, and just childish stuff, some vandalism and whatnot that my parents weren't able to pay for. With all the stress in the house, there was constant fighting. Pops liked to drink. Him and my mom used to go at it, left and right like cats and dogs. After I got arrested as a kid, my parents shipped me off to live with my grandparents because they just couldn't deal with the consequences and all the money's owed and all that other stuff. Puerto Rico to go live with my grandparents at the age of 9. And that was actually a beautiful thing because I got to learn Spanish, because I'm Puerto Rican, but we spoke English in the house. But in Puerto Rico, I got to, learn how to speak Spanish. My aunt was the principal of the school that I went to, and her son, which was my cousin, we were the same age. So every weekend, we were out doing something, and my aunt liked to visit different places of the island. So it was really beautiful. I got to hang out with my grandparents. I'm the only kid who actually did that. But then my parents ended up coming back to Puerto Rico, and it was more of the same thing. My dad couldn't get a job. We were stuck in poverty, all this other stuff. So eventually, long story short, we ended up coming to California, to Hayward, right off of A Street, in the late 80s, when I was 10, almost 11. And I was in, this situation where, we had, again, nothing but, dealing with a lot of poverty, dealing with, some abuse. I ended up going to foster care for a little while. And I was at a point where, the neighborhood looked a lot more enticing than what my house looked like. So I ended up hanging with the homies, and, at the age of, 14, got jumped into the neighborhood gang. And, the rest is history. I had a good 10-year run doing that.
Right. Wow. It's not unusual to hear, Jay. I mean, I think what is unusual, especially when you grew up in extreme poverty like yourself and myself, is to hear that people were able to climb out and do well without making no mistakes, right? Most people, even I know some guys that are law enforcement, they also made mistakes. They just didn't happen to get caught, right? So it's something about that, poverty. It kind of steers a person to try to do what they can to survive. But let me ask you this. Usually, and it sounds like you were already hitting into this already, but usually people can pinpoint a time in their life when they decided to take the turn and start to go after antisocial pursuits, right? Maybe it's a girlfriend that lead the man that way, or maybe it's a boyfriend that lead the girlfriend that way, a gang, whatever the case may be. Can you recall what happened in your life or that pinpoint that time when you decided to start to go after antisocial pursuits?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I remember at the age of, 10, 11, 12, really just, trying to call out for something, right? Trying to just be a part of something, trying to belong to something. And around that age, I got introduced, to the neighborhood gang, and I was all for it. I've always been the type of person that, I'm like, balls to the wall, 100%. Let's 160 in the fast lane going the opposite direction. That's how I was, right? And and that led to juvenile hall. It led to the boys ranch. It led to eventually to Santa Rita. To prison. I went to prison when I was 19. But it's I can just remember being in my neighborhood and and all these guys, all these homies that I hung out with, and are the ladies, and I mean just everything, and like feeling like part up, it was like, it was fun. You know what I'm saying? If it wasn't fun at the beginning, I wouldn't have done it. You know what I'm saying? But then it eventually got to that place where where it wasn't fun, and what started off at 12, 13, 14, for me at an early age, 21, 22, when I'm sitting in the in the shoe and the Corcoran shoe and Pelican Bay shoe, it just wasn't fun anymore.
Right. It's not fun. I think a lot of people get it twisted at watching television and seeing jokes made and think it's a comedy show, but I'm here a witness that it's not fun to go sit down and let somebody tell you when you can eat, and somebody open your mail for you prior to you getting it. That shit ain't fun to me. And so I agree with you, Jason. Can you talk to the people about how much time that you donated? I say donated because we're giving away our damn time, right? Donated to the criminal justice system and some of the places that you spent your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back, adding up the months here and there from juvenile hall all the way up to state prison. It's probably a good 6 or 7 years, through the boys ranch, through juvenile hall, through Santa Rita. From Santa Rita, I went to San Quentin. From San Quentin, I went to Soledad. That's where I did my first commitment. Got out for all of 8 days and caught a year flat violation. For this assault. Me and the homies took off on some dude that supposedly was a snitch or talent or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And then I went back to San Quentin, and I was there, and I ended up getting validated at San Quentin. And I spent my last couple of months there in the hole in AdSeg. That was on that year flat commitment. And then I got out and actually stayed out for a little while. I stayed out for almost a year, and then caught another gun case. So I had ex-felon with the gun and dope in my pocket and whatnot. Because at this point, I was a heroin addict. I started off with methamphetamine, and then I would shoot heroin to come down off the meth, and then it became where I was more hooked on the heroin, and so on and so forth. And then so I got busted for my last little commitment, and I got lucky. I got 16 months for that commitment. But by that time I was validated. So I went from, administrative segregation in San Quentin to Corcoran shoe, and then from Corcoran shoe to Pelican Bay shoe. That's what, I ended up getting a courtesy parole from Pelican Bay. I guess they didn't want to just release people into the community and in the Pelican Bay area. So they shipped me down to San Quentin. My parole officer picked me up at the gate, and I got out for the last time, September 14th in 1998. And I was 23 years old at the time.
Wow, that's deep. I mean, you named some hell of some prisons that I know that a lot of stuff kick off at. There's no joke around here, just by hearing different things. I haven't been to some of those places, but I know people who have, and actually currently are doing time in there. And, a lot of times you find yourself in some squeaky situations in there. But let me ask you this then. Can you tell me the moment in your life, you're doing this time and you in these different areas, different prisons, the moment in your life when you came to the realization that it was time to give up all the foolishness and become the person that I know, the person I'm looking at right now on this screen?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember sitting in Pelican Bay, 23 years old. I had one daughter already, and I had another daughter who was born when I was in prison. I had no family. I had nobody writing me. I had got served divorce papers while I was in prison. I suffer from depression, right? Or I don't suffer. I deal with depression.
Yes.
And all of this stuff, was like, what am I gonna do, right? But
right.
The thing is that I didn't know anything different, so I knew that I wanted to make a change, but I didn't necessarily know what that change was, right?
Right.
And at the same time, I'm functioning, right? Because I'm not gonna stop functioning while I'm, behind the wall.
No doubt about it.
So, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do and whatnot. And I get released, and I'm asked to do a couple of other things, right? And I'm so I do basically everything that I need to do. But I was at this point, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. When I was still in the Bay, I was like, I'm either going to change or I'm going to take a hot shot and kill myself, right? That's at the point of depression that I was. I had like this huge hole in my chest where everything that I was doing was no longer working. That void, right? So that's when I realized, that something needs to change, right? So when I got out, I ended up hooking up with this tattoo removal program because I was tatted back. I had North down my chest, Hayward on my stomach, the Huelga bird in the back of my head, quarter sleeved on both arms, all that stuff.
Right.
You could have stuck a postage stamp on my forehead and put me in a mailbox. I would have found my way to the hood.
Right.
And so I got involved with this tattoo removal program, and I had to do some community service. So I ended up doing it at this youth center in Hayward, and I enjoyed it. I was working with these kids. These kids was loving working with me, and so on and so forth. But I was working on changing the outside, right? But I hadn't necessarily begin to work on the inside. So I ended up, going back to the hood, smoking weed leads to doing this, leads to doing that. Next thing you know, I have a lightweight, heroin addiction again. And I'm running up in people's houses with a 38, laying all the dope dealers down to, get whatever I need to get my fix. And it was around Christmas time of 98. And I called my parole officer and I'm like, look, man, I'm about to either go to prison or die. Cause I was like on this serious, suicide trip, right? Not wanting to do it, but like, I'm putting myself in crazy situations, which might as well have been trying to do it myself. Right.
Yes, sir.
And so he hooked me up with this program in Fremont that I went to December 28th in 98. And that was the change, man.
Wow. You said a lot of things I want to talk to you about. One of them is that you mentioned the mental stress that we find ourselves under, right? You got people who are dealing with narcotic issues, drinking, situations where it's not an easy task to just walk away from. You have an addiction that you're trying to overcome. And then you also mentioned the mental situation that you said you've been that you're overcoming still to this day. What would you say to somebody who's in that same situation right now that's dealing with depression and things of that nature, and they just don't know what to do?
Yeah. And I didn't know what to do for the longest, you know what I'm saying? All I is that I wanted to do something different, and it's for me is really that leap of faith, you know, it's like stepping off into the unknown, because that's what recovery was. But one thing that I realized is that you can't straddle the fence. You know what I'm saying? You can't be on both sides at the same time. You have to choose a side. And that's what I did, you know, as I made this decision that I wanted to lead a different life. And I walked away from, you know, from the lifestyle. Right. But the thing is that after that happened, you know, my depression actually got worse. Right. Because here I didn't have these substances to, you know, to alleviate it with. Right.
Right.
So I went through like this serious period of, you know, of depression while I was in my program. Um, but it's like I walked through it. I met new people. I got, you know, heavily involved, you know, with the rooms in Narcotics Anonymous, and, you know, that carried me for many years.
Yes.
But it took a long time for me to address some of these underlying issues of, you know, of my depression, and actually, you know, going to a doctor and getting, you know, a diagnosis, and, you know, getting some medicine that helps me, you know, to deal with it. But, you know, I think the important part is that you have to ask for help. You have to be vulnerable, because there's strength in vulnerability, right? And that's where, you know, that's where we're able to you know, let go and move beyond some of these things that have held us back for so many years.
Oh, that's deep. Yeah, you're right. I mean, in my book, from the bottom to the top, I kind of talk about life jackets. Whereas, you know, you have somebody out, you know, out in the water somewhere, stranded, about to drown, and you see somebody come by with a vessel, and they want to throw you out a life jacket, or put out a pole to you. Most people will reach out and grab it so they can be saved. But here we go on the street. A lot of times people don't reach out for that life jacket that somebody's trying to reach and hand them. So hopefully, if somebody's watching this show right now and hear what Jason is saying, you know, you got to be vulnerable. You got to be willing to accept help. Right. I know a lot of times also growing up in our communities, you know, people of color, Black, Latinx people, we tend to think that you're weak, especially a man, for reaching out for assistance, talking to a doctor about your mental capacity. It's like a weakness for some reason. That's what we believe, instead of we don't promote that is strength to be able to go get that assistance. So I think that's something that we need to change in our communities too.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's we you know, we're programmed, you know, we have, you know, one, we have distrust of government, right? You know, that deals with it. You know, we in both of our, you know, our histories, you know, from colonization to slavery and everything else that we've dealt with, you know, Bracero program, different segregationist laws and everything else, redlining, all this other stuff. You know, it's like we have this huge distrust. We've only relied on our own community or our own family or whatever the case may be. But all those experiences, you know, on top of everything, you know, it's trauma. You know, I believe that every single one of us has dealt with trauma in some way or another, you know, from our upbringing to, you know, experience in our communities to, you know, prison and all that other stuff. And, you know, that has to be addressed, because until you address it, you know, it's like you're walking around with this heavy ass, you know, wet blanket on top of you. You know, how do you take that off?
I don't know if you said this or not. Let me ask you, because maybe you did and maybe I missed it, but did you ever put together a plan as to what you was going to do before you came home from prison, or did you come home and just freestyle it?
No, I just came home and freestyled it. You know, well, I think I had a plan. I was going to change or I was going to kill myself. That was my plan, right? And you know, luckily I didn't do the latter. You know, and I did the former. You know, the one thing is that, you know, after my violation, my year flat violation that I did, I had applied for this job at a youth center, right? It was in South Hayward. I was from North Hayward. You know, we were funking at the time. So I went into this, you know, this interview strapped. I had a 38 in my back pocket while I'm interviewing, you know, for this janitor position, right? Yes. But when I get out, there's this OG homie sitting, you know, at his desk, and he's like, "Hey, youngster, come here," you know, because I had the